to defend itself against external aggressive acts, but it recognises its responsibilities towards regional peace and security. Well, this is the moment Israel struck. Missiles could be seen and heard heading over the Iranian capital. The IDF says it struck military targets in Iran, which it accuses of relentlessly attacking Israel since October the 7th last year. It comes after Tehran launched almost 200 ballistic missiles towards Israel on the 1st of October this year, and what the country said was retaliation for the killing of Hamas's political leader on Iranian soil back in July. The Iranian army says the Israeli airstrikes against military centres in Tehran, the western province of Ilan and the southwestern province of Kurdistan were intercepted and countered successfully. The news agency Reuters quotes an Iranian army statement saying 2 soldiers were killed. In the latest international reaction, Russia has warned that an explosive escalation in hostilities risked spiralling out of control. The US and Britain both demand Iran not escalate the conflict further. The Israeli government released these pictures of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defence Minister keeping track of the strikes from the operation room at Israel's Defence Ministry in Tel Aviv. And earlier, the IDF spokesperson made this statement about the airstrikes.
The Israel Defense Forces has fulfilled its mission. If the regime in Iran were to make the mistake of beginning a new round of escalation, we will be obligated to respond. Our message is clear. All those who threaten the state of Israel and seek to drag the region into wider escalation will pay a heavy price. We demonstrated today that we have both the capability and the resolve to act decisively, and we are prepared on offense and defense to defend the state of Israel and the people of Israel.
Well, following Israel's retaliatory strike on Iran overnight, let's remind you of part of how we got here. Tensions rose in Lebanon. Handheld devices like pagers and walkie-talkies, some owned by members of Hezbollah, a group backed by Iran, spontaneously exploded. 10 days later, Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah was assassinated in Israeli strikes in southern Beirut. 3 days later, Israeli tanks crossed the border into southern Lebanon, opening up a new offensive in the conflict. Within hours, Iran had launched nearly 200 ballistic missiles towards Israel. Most were intercepted by Israel's air defences, but Netanyahu vowed then that Israel would respond. 2 weeks later, attacks on Israel was killed in a chance encounter with Israeli forces in Rafah in southern Gaza, seen as Israel's biggest victory so far in its war against Hamas. Well, our security correspondent Frank Gardner says Israel would have selected its targets carefully.
I think it's fair to assume that everything that the Israelis wanted to hit, they will have hit. They've got very precise intelligence, both from inside the country and from satellite data and from signals intelligence intercepts. They will know exactly what they wanted to hit, and that was out of a range of targets. And it's a fairly limited list in that they have gone for essentially 2 things. Iran's air defenses, which clears the way for any future attack should they decide to escalate this further, or particularly if there is an Iranian response in the meantime. And secondly, they have gone for missile production facilities, the very factories that produce the kind of missiles that hit Israel on October the 1st. So it was a relatively calibrated relatively restrained. I mean, notwithstanding the fact that countries in the region, many of them are condemning this as dangerous escalation and a violation of Iran's sovereignty.
And what do you make of Iran's defences? We have been seeing pictures overnight, seemingly showing Iranian air defences intercepting certainly some Israeli missiles over the skyline. What is your assessment of the state of Iran's defences?
Well, they're certainly not 100%, nor, of course, Israel's, as we saw on October the 1st, that this was always the fear in Israel, I think, that Iran has such a huge arsenal of ballistic missiles that should it decide to do a kind of massed attack, exactly as it did on October the 1st, that some of them would get through, as indeed they did. So it's too early to say exactly what the so-called BDA, the bomb damage assessment, is here. But certainly some things were hit and some things got intercepted. I don't know the exact numbers yet, but do you know what? There is a degree of presentation about this. I'm not going to call it theatre, but there is a degree of public perception that's incredibly important here for both sides. They both need to look tough and try to act as a deterrent to the other. So Iran has a vested interest in telling its population, don't worry, we repelled the aggressor, they were sent packing, we've got a strong country and nothing can hurt us, nothing to fear here, which of course actually Iranians aren't very concerned about a future escalation into a war. And as far as Israel is concerned, they are flinging their weight around the region currently, fighting a war in Lebanon, in Gaza, at least that's how it's perceived, and now in Iran, determined to take out their enemies and to weaken, if not destroy, Iran's so-called axis of resistance, which is leading to a lot of attacks on Israel. Meanwhile, let's not forget, behind all of this, as well as the Gaza war raging, there is a lot of conflict happening in the West Bank. We don't see or hear quite so much of it internationally, but it's a deeply unhappy place where illegal settlements are still continuing, and the settlers are trying to oust Palestinian families that have lived there for generations. And that's really being lost in the bigger conflicts that are happening around the region.
Well, we're just going to pause and just leave the events in Iran for a moment and head to Lebanon. The airstrikes on Iran come as Israel continues its offensive against Hezbollah in Lebanon. These pictures show smoke rising above the Beirut skyline this morning as Israeli bombardments there continue. And earlier, a funeral was held for one of the 3 journalists killed by an Israeli strike in Hasbaya, southern Lebanon, on Friday. Right, let's speak to our Middle East correspondent, Nafisa Konavad. Just talk us through the latest where you are.
Lewis, just a while ago we had sound barrier breaking by Israeli jets over Beirut. It sounded like explosion, but last night there were another wave of attacks on southern suburb of Beirut. I had at least eight very heavy explosions, and the Israeli army says that they were targeting Hezbollah's infrastructure and also intelligence positions, which is this is what Israel says, but the announcement, the warning came only about 30 minutes ago, before the attack, and right after explosion we had, while Iran was being attacked also last night, different parts of Lebanon, including the south and northeast in Bekaa. There were heavy bombardment in those areas as well. And this morning there was a report of earthquake on the border between Lebanon and Israel, and now it has been clear that the wave that was interpreted to the earthquake was the result of a part of Lebanese village, Lebanese village being detonated by Israeli army. This is while Hezbollah also is releasing statement after statement claiming responsibility for different multiple attacks on Israeli forces on other side of the border and also inside the Lebanese territory. They have claimed that they have destroyed at least 7 tanks Hamas, and they have shot down a drone, a big drone, surveillance drone, and also in the 48 hours, at least 10 Israeli soldiers were killed. This is what also the Israeli army has confirmed. At least 10 Israeli soldiers were killed and 24 soldiers were wounded.
Matthew, so thank you very much for that update there from Beirut. Well, let's get the very latest now on those Israeli strikes on Iran. We can go to Jerusalem. Our Middle East correspondent Yolande now is there for us. Yolande, what has the Israeli authorities there been saying about it?
Well, we know that ahead of these strikes there was a conference call between members of the Israeli Security Cabinet really to authorise what then took place. It was the early hours of the morning that we got the first reports of explosions outside of Tehran. Very quickly, the Israeli military came out to confirm that it had begun its long-awaited response to Iran's ballistic missile attack on Israel, which happened at the start of the month. Then we got more details about 6 o'clock local time. It was confirmed by the Israeli military that the operation was over. They said that they had involved dozens of their fighter jets. All of them had returned back safely to their bases. And what had been targeted at several locations in Iran was the different sites used for manufacturing and launching drones and ballistic missiles. There had also been a first round of strikes inside Iran where they had gone after the Iranian air defences as well. They consider this to have been a successful mission, said that there should not be a counter-retaliation coming from Iran. That could lead to an escalation. There have been lots of messages coming from international leaders, from the US as well, really sort of urging restraint at this point. But what we've heard from the Iranians, from the foreign ministry, is they have said that Iran will respond. It's obliged to defend itself, and they say that Israel has broken international humanitarian law. So really all eyes on Iran at this point to see what happens next.
Could you just talk us through a little bit the relation with the US and the role and the kind of chronology here?
Definitely. I mean, since that major strike by Iran on Israel at the beginning of this month, we were told by the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that Iran would pay the price. And there was a lot of media speculation that Israel was planning to hit more sensitive sites inside Iran, nuclear sites, oil production facilities. And that really kind of added to the international fears and fears from Israel's closest ally, the US, that this could tip the region really into a full-blown war. There could, of course, be big economic consequences as well, going into a US presidential election for hitting sites like oil production facilities inside Iran, potentially having an effect on global energy prices. And so there have been these conversations that have gone on over the past